Welcome everyone to Supporting Your Child with PMDD. Today we are doing a panel discussion with some of IAPMD's Young Advisory Board. We are super excited to be here and do this. We haven't done this before. So we are blessed to have three of our awesome Young Advisory Board members that have been with us for a couple of years now and have also done some really neat things with us, including creating some of the documents that we have for young people on the website. We've also taken part in events. Nia actually runs one of our peer support groups, and so we have a wealth of knowledge here with us today. So we're super excited to be able to offer this to you today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sandy McDonald, and I am the co-founder and executive director of the International Association for Pre Menstrual Disorders. I too am a mom of a daughter, and so I will speak a little bit about my experience with that as well. Just as a bit of a notice, Ella, who is one of our panelists here, she is actually not my daughter. We just happen to be live in the same area and have the same last name. So I'm just adding clarification for that, because that's one of the first things I thought of, was everybody was going to think that Ella was my daughter. Unfortunately, my daughter couldn't be here. She's not on the Young Advisory Board, but maybe someday I'll be able to get her on there. But I'll be speaking a little bit to that experience, as well as Nicole, Nia, and Ella will be sharing their experiences. So before we go ahead and get started, just to have a short disclaimer here. So this webinar is for educational purposes, and it is not intended as medical advice. The IAPMD does not endorse, sponsor, encourage, or use the information or services presented, and we accept no liability for the content. Please consult your trusted healthcare professional and your own values and beliefs when making decisions when it comes to treatment or care. So the panelists today are Nia, Ella, and Nicole, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. So Nicole, I see you on the screen first. So I'm going to pick on you first. If you can unmute yourself and tell us about yourself and your experience with premenstrual disorder.
Thank you, Sandy. So hi, everyone. My name's Nicole. I'm from the UK and I work in the NHS, but I'm also an actor and a playwright. I was diagnosed with PMDD at the age of 20. I started showing symptoms at the age of 12. So when I started menstruation, I tried first-line treatments first. So a few different combined pills, antidepressants alongside that. I was then put into chemical menopause at the age of 20. So I was on that for on and off about 2 years because it kept wearing off. And then at the age of 23, I had both ovaries, tubes, womb, and cervix removed for severe PMDD. And I'm currently coming up to 3 years post-op.
Thank you for sharing, Nicole. Ella.
Hey everyone, can everyone hear me? We're good? Okay, thanks, Sandy. My name's Ella. I'm 23 years old and I live in Halifax, Nova Scotia, the same city as Sandy. I am currently a television reporter for one of our national news broadcasters. So I work for Global News, if anybody knows where that is, in Halifax. And my journey with PMDD was a little later than Nicole's. I didn't actually find out I had PMDD until 2020, which was a very tumultuous time for everybody. And I think actually, was part of the reason why I got a diagnosis when I did. But yeah, I started to have issues from the age of, I'd say, 17 on. With irritability and frustration and a lot of depression. So it wasn't until 2020 that my parents actually started to notice that I was going through something same time every month that was more severe than other women and non-binary folks my age who menstruate. So I received a diagnosis. I was very fortunate to get one fairly early on in my journey in 2020. And ever since then have been going through the process of finding out what different treatments work best for me. And I currently take antidepressants and use birth control to manage my PMDD, as well as see a clinical counselor who specializes in PMDD, who is wonderful. And if anybody wants to know who it is, I'm happy to share. Yeah, and then outside of, my diagnosis, I love to dance, I love mountain biking and traveling. So that's a little about me.
Thank you, Ella. Nia.
Hi everyone, I'm Nia. I'm also based in the UK, and my PMDD really kind of started to be noticed about 18. Prior to that, I had a lot of problems with my period when I was younger, but it was always kind of my moods and stuff put down to just being a teenager, and it was really difficult. So it was only when I moved to university that I actually realised that there was something bigger going on and there was issues with my mental health. Went through my GP and spent a good couple of years moving around with no one really sure what was going on. And it was only through kind of speaking to my parents and my dad watching a article on BBC News talking about PMDD, where he stopped it and listened and went, you know what, that actually sounds very similar to what Nia goes through. And it was kind of through that and through him literally sending me a BBC iPlayer link to it that I found out about PMDD, and I started on my PMDD journey, and that started in about 2019. Through there, I then got my formal diagnosis in 2021 and started working through various talking therapies and treatments to support me. I am currently restarting chemical menopause, and that has been a really useful tool for me over the last probably 2.5 years now. So yeah, that's a very short kind of coverage of me.
Thank you all very much for introducing yourselves and taking the time. We do have a lot of questions. We did ask, we were trying to figure out, I guess, the best way to be able to, accommodate and learn and understand what parents actually want to know about. And, this is kind of the first time that we've done this. So we did pre-ask for questions, and we did get quite a few questions. So I was thinking what we would like to do is maybe run through those and give everybody the opportunity to answer. If you are in the audience and you have a question and you want to ask, you can pop it in the Q&A section of the down at the bottom of your screen. There's also the chat option to the side, and Brett is here monitoring the chat box. So if anybody has a specific question or is looking for anything specific on the website or anything like that, you can also pop your question over there. So one of the first questions that we had, and we actually had this one come in a couple of times from a few different people, was how can I help my daughter manage anxiety or panic attacks during her PMDD while she's struggling? I know everybody here has a really great wealth of experience going to school and, navigating through life as a PMDD patient. So do any of you have any suggestions or recommendations for the parents on how they could help support their kids while they're going through things like this?
I think the main thing from my experience was just to be there to listen. I think when you're, as a young person with PMDD, it's so much to deal with, and you just want, well, from what I experienced anyway, you just want someone to like sit there and just listen so you can kind of release everything that's going on inside. And I know it's hard as a parent for you to like take that all in, especially when obviously it's like every month. And my mum kind of blamed herself for not picking it up, but she kind of learnt to listen to me. She never judged and took my lead with where I wanted to go with treatment, and how I wanted to deal with my PMDD. She never kind of, I think she tried too hard at first, but when I said to her, look, I want to do this, I want to do that, she kind of learned to like follow my lead, because she listens. So I think for me anyway, listening is the most important thing.
Just to add to that, listening is huge, and I think it also becomes especially important in cases where there are parents out there, I don't know how many of you are watching today who maybe also had a premenstrual disorder in your youth and have your own experience with it. And I think when you have a child who has it, it's really important to remember that your experience and their experience are separate. They're not going to be the same. So for me, that was my experience. When I was diagnosed with PMDD, my mom discovered that that's what she had been struggling with in her early 20s. And for her, it came out in different ways, but there were a lot of similarities. And so once I got my official diagnosis and we realized this is something that she had too, at the beginning, she would compare us, say things like, oh, when I was your age, this is how I dealt with that. And this is about the time when this started to calm down for me. And this was my experience. And so this should be yours as well. Which of course is not a one size fits all. And we've gone through a lot of work together of, learning that together. And how she needs to also respect that our journeys are separate. But I think she's so keen to help and show that she's there and she understands that at times it would come across as her telling me what I should and shouldn't be feeling, with PMDD, which isn't helpful or at the end of the day or wasn't for myself. So I think listening is super important, and then also recognizing that there's going to be differences in how you have each managed your PMD or depression. Maybe a parent has had experience with depression, but not PMDD. They're similar. They're not the same, obviously. So just making sure that your child knows that you respect that their situation is different, but you're still going to be supportive of whatever they're going through.
That's so enlightening to hear you say that, especially as a mom, Ella, because I know, and speaking from my own experience again, which I did say that I might throw a few little things in there as I could, but being a mom, as a sufferer of a PMD and having a daughter who is also a sufferer, it is really hard, and you do tend to, as a mom, not meaning to, I don't think, because I know I certainly didn't mean to project my own issues or my own feelings and thoughts or symptoms and things like that on her, but a lot of the times it was very innocent on my behalf, just, maybe this will happen, or this happened to me this way, maybe it'll happen to you this way. And I did learn in time, as she would become increasingly frustrated with me, that sometimes she didn't want to hear my issues and how I was doing, because she wanted to be able to speak to her own experiences. And then sometimes that would be hard and we would tend to butt heads or, become upset with each other. And I think just having that, learning that mutual communication and respect and understanding, and definitely patience, because we really do all tend to have our own issues, our own struggles, and things are very different for everybody. But yeah, I think being patient and having, being a good active listener is really important as a parent. And if you can develop that relationship where you can just have the open communication, it certainly is so helpful. Nia?
Yeah, it was exactly as you were saying. I think it's always really interesting, and the big one that I always come out with is, I think the thing that helped me with my kind of interaction with my parents in it was the fact that nothing's taboo. And actually there is that environment where I'm an only child, I'm an only daughter, so actually sitting and having that conversation and being really open of like, I'm having painful periods and my mood isn't feeling great and I'm struggling with my mental health. Like, being in an environment and kind of fostering that environment where nothing's taboo and you can sit and talk rationally about anything really then helped me in those moments where it was actually telling my parents that I was struggling and asking for help and explaining how I was feeling. And it enabled that conversation that meant they were also aware of what was going on. So if they had ideas, that communication space is so important, but creating that environment where actually, regardless of what it is, you feel like you can go, hey, this is happening and I don't think it's normal. Do you know anything about it? And just being able to talk about it. I had experiences with my mum when she openly told me about her experiences with a similar medication that I was on. So there's a lot of that space that I found really useful.
Thank you. The next question is, how can I encourage my daughter to take a more active role in learning about PMDs?
This is one that I heard a couple days ago when we were talking about potential questions, and I had to think about it a bit because really it depends on the situation. It really, really depends on if, does your child already have a diagnosis? If so, for me, I found learning about it really empowering. And I wanted to know as much as possible because I already had that, validation from a doctor that this is what you have, which I think for many of us who have struggled for so long, not knowing if they're crazy or a bad person or, mentally unstable or all these awful things that, you come into your brain, that was really empowering to know more about it. So I would say if your child does have an official diagnosis, it'll come to them in their own time. I think they really need to want to know more, and that can't be forced on anybody. I do think with time and with trial and error, and depending on what stage they are at in their diagnosis or their journey, they will want to find out more. Another helpful thing I found is, especially if you're young, I know, especially in university, maybe even in high school, resources are hard to look through. There's big text resources everywhere online, and as much as IAPMD is an excellent resource, it's not always the easiest thing to consume, right? When you're in your luteal phase, sometimes you can only watch a video, and sometimes you can only listen and close your eyes and lay in bed. And so for me, some resources I sought out in that time were, YouTube videos of people who have PMDD, who talk about their experience. And that made me feel less alone. It helped me learn things. It encouraged me to start my own YouTube channel about it, which is not active at the moment, so I won't plug that in. But I think that was a really helpful resource that was consumable during hard times, as well as podcasts. There's some great PMDD podcasts. You can put them in, you can fall asleep to them, whatever's needed, because during your luteal phase and when you're already overwhelmed with school or work or just life in general, being a young person, having easily consumed resources as a tool are really, really helpful. So that's one tip that I can provide, but I think really, your child has to want to go that extra mile to find these things out. And maybe if they're not at that stage where they physically can, it's because they're going through a really hard time with PMDD. And that's something we all have to be kind with ourselves and understand that there's time to figure these things out. If they don't already have a diagnosis, that might be the missing key part of having that validation, because I know there's a lot of things that are thrown around there that, bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, ADHD, tons of different things. And so if you don't know this is exactly what you have, I feel like as a young person myself, I would not want to dive deep into it without having that kind of validation first. So ideally you get the diagnosis first, but it's not everyone's journey.
I think, as Ella said, just to jump in on that one, it is so situational dependent, and I think it also is really dependent on age. And that point, as Ella said, you can't force somebody onto a PMDD journey. But I know when I was first looking at it at like 18, 19, the things that you were seeing online were sometimes quite scary. You'd see words like hysterectomy and stuff like that, which as an 18-year-old was absolutely terrifying. And I think the thing that then really taught me to do, and I had a lot of support from my parents on, was to focus less on learning about it for the sake of learning about it, and actually learning about it to help me. So learning about a coping strategy that might be helpful, or going, okay, so the GP's prescribed me this treatment. What does that mean? What does that look like? How could this affect me? What things do I need to be aware of? And rather than just going, oh, I think I have this condition, and learn everything I possibly can about it, actually focusing on what's useful and helpful for me. That was a really beneficial approach on my side that I found really useful, was taking it down the treatment options or coping strategies route rather than just learning about it.
And just to add to that, as Mia said, you do learn these little facts as you go along. If you're just following what's important and helpful for you, you will learn more about PMDs, PME, PMDD, all the ins and outs. It just happens with time. So yeah, really focusing on your own journey is super important.
I totally agree with what Nia and Ella have said. They've got really good points. I just want to add in, personally, I felt I was in this really weird space of denial. I knew something was wrong, but I was kind of trying so hard to kind of put it off. So I kind of didn't want to know any more about it. And I think as a parent, it helps when you actually sit down with that young person and ask them how they're feeling. Because I think encouraging that openness, encouraging that honesty and the vulnerability, it allows them to feel like they're in a safe space, and it helps them feel ready to want to learn more about what they're going through. I think if it's head on, so you say, well, there's this resource, like if you bring it on too quickly, I think it can be a bit detrimental, because I think it depends how they're dealing with the possibility that this is what they're going through. So I think having like an open conversation with them first, even though it can be quite hard, and just kind of sensing where their head's at with what they're going through, I think that will lead in how they want to learn about PMDD, and just help with just not embracing it, that's the wrong word, but knowing that they've got PMDD and actually dealing with it rather than trying to put it off. And you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I do find as a mom that sometimes, we care so much about our children that we just want everything to be okay. And I think that I can probably speak for myself and probably some of the parents here, if not all of them, when I say that, we're armed with so much knowledge now, and we just want everything to always be okay, especially for our children. Because I know it's the first thing I think of when I wake up. I think of my kids and I want everybody to be okay. And, and I maybe know too much. I have too much knowledge. So it would be like, well, there's this, so you start overwhelming everybody with information and knowledge. And that's just, I learned the hard way that that's just not helpful, sending a text and sending a website and sending some information, leaving information lying around and stuff like that. All that did was get me in trouble with my daughter. So it's like allowing, allowing some of that space, but letting her know that I am here, I'm available. It's always okay to talk about it, and that, not everything's always going to be perfect and okay. So I think, people taking time and just being there and offering, like you said, Nicole, that safe space is just so important. We want everybody to be safe, and we want people to be able to come to us, and everybody to feel okay and feel loved. So we have a lot of questions, and we have some great comments coming in too. So let's see. How did you advocate for yourself when you found out that you had a premenstrual disorder? And, how did you navigate, like, through school and through university and through your studies and things like that? How did you advocate with professors, teachers, like that space, through those different spaces, I guess, and workspaces, if any of you have that experience that you can speak to that. There's quite a few questions actually on that. So if you all want to take a chance to take a stab at that one, please go for it.
With university, that was when I think I'm similar to Nia, where I knew something was wrong, like when I started university. I would take in letters. I'd talk to lecturers. I found like Mind in the UK, there was a webpage on PMDD, and I've still got the list. I wrote every single symptom down and then like put how they were affecting me. And I went to my gynecologist appointment. I was like, these are my symptoms. I think something might be wrong. And I was quite open with everybody involved in like the education side of it, and I always have been in terms of workplace as well. I think having that open conversation with them, just even though obviously it's hard and sometimes it's not worked, and I needed to advocate for myself more and putting myself on the table so they can't say, well, you didn't tell us this, or you didn't, I'd keep them up to date with my treatment, where I was in my treatment, the appointments that I had, and just say, look, this makes me suicidal, so any like clinic letters, I got a few of my friends at uni to write like a letter saying how I was during my luteal phase and how I was when I was fine. So I had other people's perspectives on how I was. So I had all this evidence. Sorry, I go off on a tangent. It's just my surgical menopause brain. I think the best thing to do is to just be open about it, and just lay it down on the table, which it's difficult, especially when you're young. I mean, I've got used to it, and I don't know whether anything that I've said helps. But yeah, just your own body. The PMDD patient knows their own body, and they have to go with it, and just keep fighting, even if it's going. I couldn't hand in assignments. I was really bad at handing in assignments, so I did what's called extenuating circumstances. I must have put in like 3-4 extenuating circumstances because of my PMDD. I got GPs to write a letter so I can send off. Obviously I sent off the letters that my friends had written. So I had as much evidence as I needed. Well, I felt that I needed to send off so they couldn't really question it. Like I said, I don't know whether that's helpful, but yeah, that's the road I took.
So
I'm sorry, Nia, you go ahead. You go ahead, it's okay.
Oh, thank you. So on my side, the self-advocacy at university was relatively simple. I say relatively simple for me. I'm a very outspoken person naturally, but I think the biggest kind of advice that I can give to anyone that's trying to navigate any sort of process and advocate for themselves is understand the process and work within it. It can get really frustrating, it can get really tiring, but as Nicole has mentioned, you have situations like extenuating circumstances. If you understand and you take that time to go, okay, how do I do this? What evidence do I need? What do I need to report? And having those really open and frank conversations, like Nicole said, and going, okay, is a picture of my medication prescription box enough to provide evidence that I need this extenuating circumstance? Like what is it that you actually need from me to justify the position that I'm in and to explain what I'm experiencing? Understanding that and understanding the fact that yes, you normally have these big support networks and assigned tutors and things like that, but actually at the end of the day, teachers, lecturers, etc., they are human. If you go to one that you trust and you go to somebody that actually you feel comfortable with and explain the situation and ask for help, usually that goes a long way. And even if that is as simple as going, I don't know how to get extra time or how to rearrange my exam, For me, my anxiety was getting really bad within PMDD, and I was getting to the stage where I was making myself ill in preparations for exam periods. So I rocked up on one of my on one of the tutor's offices, knocked on his door, and said, "I'm really struggling. I need help with these exams. Like I'm stressing myself out. I feel like I'm making myself ill. What can I do?" And through that, we then sat down. He was like, "Okay, well, what I want you to do is write down everything about being in an exam that causes you issues and that makes it difficult for you right now." And in writing that down, it was like, okay, so being in waiting outside the exam hall with everybody else, talking about it and talking about how much the revision they've done makes you really anxious and really sets off a whole load of symptoms. Okay, we'll give you a different room. You're on the opposite side of campus, away from everybody. Just going and explaining those types of things really helped me. From a medical side, it's really similar in my experience. So it took me a few years to get diagnosed from when I first presented. I think it was about 4 off the top of my head. And I went through lots of different treatment processes, lots of different, we think it might be this, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that. And actually the biggest thing was being patient, but going into that appointment going, okay, if they're going to suggest this, then I'm going to ask these types of information, or I'm going to ask these questions. So one example was when I was with my gynecologist. I'd had a trial period of chemical menopause. It worked really well and I wanted to stay on it. And my gynecologist wanted to come off and try a combination of treatments that I'd already tried together that hadn't been successful. And it was, okay, if I go in and they suggest that I do these types of treatments, then the question I'm going to ask this type of question, I'm going to find out and ask and probe the questions in that way, rather than going in and just getting straight defensive or going, this is what I want, this is what I need. Taking that time to understand why the pathway is the way it is, what that process is, and acknowledging that you're going step by step by step. It can be tedious, it can be frustrating, and I'm never going to pretend it isn't. But actually, the thing that you can then go with is, well, I know that actually I'm following it through. And each step, it's one step closer to the part that works and the bit that helps. I realize that's a really strange way of advocating, but that was the big thing that I did. The other one that I'd say is keep going back. If something's not working, keep representing, keep going back, keep saying, I've tried this treatment and it's not working. Can we try something new? That is absolutely fine. And there's no issue in making yourself a little bit of a nuisance in a polite way and constantly going back and saying, actually, this isn't working, or I've tried this and it's not helped. I realize I'm rambling a little bit, but yeah, they're my big things, is kind of understanding that process, just being patient and asking the questions, and going back if the help you've got isn't enough, and just keeping being persistent with it.
Yeah, and I think most universities, I know here, because I live in a different country than Nicole and Nia, but I know most universities and most a lot of workplaces have accommodations, and if they don't, then legally there are some accommodations. Each country has different accommodations when it comes to, the American Disabilities Act or different things like that. So there are some options for people to be able to get accommodations if people's children haven't tried yet. But if they are struggling, then there are some accommodations that can be made at most places. Ella, I saw you were going to answer.
Yes. Yeah, I actually jotted down a few things to keep me on track, because I know there's a lot of questions to ask, but hopefully I'm able to answer a few of them just through my answer and Nicole and Nia's answers as well. For advocacy, I had a different experience to Nia. I was very lucky with my diagnosis. I went to a GP with my university health provider, Dalhousie. And I called her. It was over COVID. I called her on the phone. I said, I'm struggling. This is how I feel. It's always a week and a half before my period. Is there any kind of correlation? I hadn't had the education in my high school years about even what PMS was. I didn't know what it was. Looking back, that makes me very angry right now that I didn't have those tools and that knowledge. But she was very helpful and immediately, walked me through what I was experiencing and talked to me about my symptoms. And from there said, you know what, I think you could have PMDD. And I want you to try to start tracking your symptoms. I actually just happen to have my symptom tracker right here, but oh, it's blurring. If anyone wants to see it, I can show you later. But I just every day I write down some feelings that I have. And from there, I was able to get a diagnosis. My advocacy from then on has been a lot of just advocating for, what treatments do work for me and what ones don't. I was put on birth control right away to manage my PMDD. And that's something that a lot of practitioners tend to do. It is not the fix for everybody. For me, it did help kind of regulate my cycle enough to where I would be able to notice there was a pattern with my symptoms. So I could, count it down to the day almost of when I was going to start having maybe panic attacks, anger, depression. Someone said suicidal ideation in there, and I know that's a complete other topic, but that's something I had as well. And so to be able to know when it was coming was really helpful. So birth control was helpful. They also put me on an SSRI, which I've been on this whole time. I'm on escitalopram. I changed it one time to Yaz since it's the FDA approved one. I've heard amazing stories that it's worked for a lot of people. It did not work for me. And I had to advocate with my healthcare practitioner to put me back on escitalopram because I would take it and 20 minutes later I'd be sobbing and just super, super depressed. So I think if you're going to try any of these medications, one thing I would say is have an emergency plan in place. Make sure that you know what medication your child is trying out or that they have a support system that knows they're trying out a new medication and monitor that really closely. But when it came to school, that's when my advocacy is something I'm still learning about. I graduated university, but now I'm in the workplace and things are very different. As Sandy said, there's lots of accommodations available in school. So, there can be accommodations to make your deadline for your assignment due later. For your exam, you can take longer sometimes. I was one of those people who never wanted to go ask for that accommodation. And I really, really wish that I'd done it sooner because it's a huge weight lifted off. It's so important, like Mia said, to talk to your teachers, and most of them are human and will understand. If they don't understand, there's always things that you can do to help yourself out, which is, first of all, being kind with yourself, being gentle, knowing that if you don't get an assignment in or you are failing the class, it's okay. You can take it again another semester. Maybe it's not the class for you. Maybe there's some other academic coach who can help you out, but it's not the end of the world. School's really, really hard, especially in university. I also wrote down planning has really helped for me. So with this tracker that I have through school, I was able to know, okay, from kind of this day to this day or this luteal week, I'm not going to be at my best. That's not the best time to do a big assignment. So if I can look ahead on my syllabus and know something's due that week, I could maybe get it done beforehand and save an easier assignment for that week. Or I could go talk to my teacher and say, can I hand it in the week afterwards? And just working around the luteal phase based on where it lies through your tracking, through birth control, whatever means you use to kind of monitor your cycle. I found planning is really helpful. With work, things are completely different, but like Sandy said, there should be rules in place, and even unions that have disability committees. There's lots of options depending on where you work. And if there aren't any, then there should be, and that's a complaint you can bring up. I hope that's a little helpful.
Wonderful. You're all such a wealth of information. This is great. What lifestyle modifications have you made that you found to be most helpful? If any. If you didn't make any, that's okay. But if any of you did anything specific, or if you do anything specific that you think is helpful that may help some other people.
I think the big one for me, it's not a major lifestyle modification of like, oh, I do yoga every 2 days or anything like that. But for me, it came back again to that communication piece and to actively acknowledging that, certainly when it comes to my relationships and the people around me, that there are things that I need to do and I need to meet halfway on, to enable communication. So that might be with, I was actually talking to one of my parents about this recently, about how when I was a teenager, it would have been really helpful if we had like a phrase or a word that, if when my dad and I were having an argument, that I could have said to be like, no, actually, you know what, I'm in my luteal phase, we need to stop this conversation now. And him know that, like, okay, that's a hard stop, we're not going to go into this topic right now because it's clearly not the right time to. Understanding that space and actually working with the people around me within my support network to go, okay, how does my PMD, like, what is difficult about my PMDD? What makes it hard for me to communicate? And likewise, what makes it hard for somebody to help? And then enabling it from there, and having those conversations have probably been the most helpful change. It's not a major lifestyle change, but actually acknowledging that the support kind of goes both ways, and that communication goes both ways has been a big one. I have a little octopus to help communicate my mood to people, and things like that. So there's so many little strategies that you can use, but actively acknowledging that you have a part to play in enabling the support network to support you is probably the biggest realization that I've had. I know it's not a major lifestyle change or like a vitamin or something, but that's the best one on my side.
It's a really good one, Nia. With the code word. I know that I tried the code word with my family as kind of, a lifestyle change with communication, and it didn't work out perfectly. Our code word was pineapples. It didn't fit with us very well. But at the end of the day, we started to do something my mom has been really good at, which is, do you want to be helped, hugged, or heard? And I know this is a saying that is around a lot, and used in different scenarios, but I found that one helpful because for me, as someone who might be having a PMDD episode, hearing, do you want this, or this, and having the option, it helps me to think, what do I actually want right now? What is it that would help me right now? Is it, should I vent to her? That's being heard. Do I want advice and assistance with something? Is that being helped? Or sometimes is a hug all I want, to just, we don't need to talk about it. We can just have a hug and that's all that's needed. That's the ideal, of course. That won't work in every situation. I know there's been times she's asked me that and I've been like, shut up, like, I don't want to hear that right now. But with her trying it over and over again, slowly, I've been able to also accept that that was, the agreement we came to, that she was going to try this out. And most times it has really helped. That's one lifestyle change in communication. Another lifestyle change is just more to do with the day-to-day. In the luteal phase, or when I'm feeling bad, it's sleep is huge for me. Sleep's always been huge for me, but sometimes it's, an hour nap after work or school, and then it's going to bed at 9 and waking up at 8 if possible, or just really putting in those extra hours, because during that week you just get so exhausted. So if it's possible, more sleep, fueling your body, eating food. And maybe it's not the best day to try to like have lighter food. Sometimes you just need like a big bowl of pasta, and that's the best. That's one of my favorite little tricks, is to just eat something and get good rest. Yoga is also great, but as Nia said, it's not always the most practical thing, especially when you're already dealing with so much.
I think, oh, go on, Nicole.
I was just about to say, I'm probably not the best person to kind of answer this question, because up until recently, I tried to change my lifestyle as much as possible, but because for me, my cycle was so long, so it averaged like 42 days, and I started my symptoms on like day 14 and then lasted till like day 9 of like the next cycle, I never really had a chance to kind of change any aspect of my lifestyle. I think like post-op, there's two things that's kind of I'm trying to implement is to be kind to myself and not try and fight it, especially during a panic attack. I had a few DBT sessions through work, and we're talking about like panic attacks, and one of them was accept that it's happening. And I think when you get to luteal and you realize it's happening, I think there's an aspect where you're going to like fight or flight. And I think especially before surgery, I tried so hard to fight it because I hated it so much. I tried so hard to fight it that kind of made it worse. And now I've looked at it a different way, and actually it's happening. I can't do anything about it. I'm gonna be okay. Has kind of helped me when I do have flare-ups, and I kind of wish I could have implemented that well before, but I mean it's difficult because you're not really in the headspace to kind of you just want to fight this thing that you can't fight, and you kind of only realize it when you come out of it and you're like, actually, so yeah, they're not massive lifestyle changes, but they've helped me in terms of like actually dealing with what's happening.
I'd say, like, Nicole, in some ways that's the biggest lifestyle change you can make, in my opinion. That, like, I went through exactly the same kind of self-acceptance journey. As much as you try and fight PMDD and you sit and hope that the next thing will fix it and it will go away forever and then you never have to worry about it again, that's, at least in my experience, not been the reality. So that actual understanding of, okay, this is where we are. It's not great, it's not fair, it's not fun, but this is where we are. And actually going, how can I enable myself? How can I support myself? How can I show myself that compassion? It's things like, and it's also understanding that actually the help that's available, it doesn't matter what that is, if it's a help. I was talking to my parents recently about my own medication journey and restarting chemical menopause, and was so unsure about it. And I turned around and said, I feel like I'm failing by going down the medication route. And the response I got from my dad was, well, you wouldn't not have a paracetamol if you had a headache, would you? If you had a headache, you'd take you wouldn't sit and suffer through it. No one's going to give you the medal for suffering through the headache. You'd take the painkiller and crack on and live your life. And actually accepting that that's a thing is the biggest change you can make. It's not a physical point at lifestyle change, it's very much an internal one, but yeah, I'd argue actually it's a huge one. Sorry, Ella.
No, that's okay. That was a really good point. I was really fortunate on the medication side because I have a family member who already was taking antidepressants every day. So for me, going on them, I got to talk to that person a lot, and they kind of told me, it's not a Band-Aid fix. It really can help you, and a lot of people do it, and not to be upset about it or ashamed of it. It's just something that is an extra tool to help people who have these kind of conditions to live. It can be really, really hard without. I think I lost my train of thought a little bit. So maybe we should come back to me, but we can move on to the next question.
It's okay. I know there's so much going on too. There's stuff in the chat and I have so many questions, and I know we're getting close to being, getting to time. So, and I do just want to let everybody know that there are a lot of questions, and if we don't get to the questions or the comments today, we do plan to try to answer, and we can send stuff out at a later time. We did have a few parents that said that they have noticed that they think their daughter may have this, and they wondered if you all had any tips or suggestions on how they could, how they could help their daughter, I guess, take that active role in learning about PMDD themselves. The daughter has either come forward and said that she has it, or the parents think that she might have it. So do you have any suggestions or recommendations on things that they can do to, maybe learn more about it? I know that comes a lot back to advocacy, but if you knew, or did any of you experience that? Did you think that you had something wrong and you didn't do anything about it? And how can you, what did you do about that, I guess?
So I was going in circles and circles and circles, and had no idea what was going on. I have other symptoms that mean that other conditions that make my cycle extremely irregular. So actually diagnosing PMDD was a challenge for me. It depends on the person's age is the short answer. For me, this happened when I was about 19, 20. But my dad sent me a link to a video about someone talking about it and went, you need to watch this. It sounds like what you're going through. And it was someone who had been diagnosed, that was actively sitting and going, this is my experience. This is how it's affected me. And this is my symptoms and this is what's going on. And it's a condition called PMDD. And not many people know about it, but it is real. And that was the thing that changed it for me, was actually having somebody going as blunt as going, you need to sit down and watch this and like look at this description, look at this person talking, because I think this might be you. That opened all of the doors. And ultimately, I would not have been diagnosed. I would not have even known that PMDD existed if it wasn't for that conversation. So yeah, very much depending on age, but being blunt about it and almost going, this sounds like you, does it resonate? Because if it does, we can look at it, we can work on it, and we can follow the treatment paths and we can do it together, and that's okay. That is probably the biggest thing I can say to enable that diagnosis. Yeah, that's kind of my side of it.
Such a good point. For me, it was somewhat similar, a little different. It was my dad who kind of was the the breaking point in a sense for me to actually go and find out if there was something going on, because you tend to, growing up as a woman or a menstruating person, if your father notices when you're going to have your period and to the day, that tells you you're giving off some pretty clear signs, and that was the case for me. Something that he regrets about his approach now is, he'd make comments like, oh, are you about to get your period? He wouldn't say anything like, hey, I've noticed that this timing is the same every month. Could it be cycle related? It was a different approach. It was more of a dad not really thinking too much about his words approach. And to me, that would anger me. That made me feel like he was just feeding into stereotypes. And there's plenty out there about menstruation. And so it took me a little longer after that. And it really came down to one night where I was sobbing. I hadn't been able to stop crying for 4 hours. I was at university on the phone with both my parents were on the other end. It was really scary for them. But I just said, like, I don't know what this is. And it took my dad going, when are you having your period? And my mom's like, that's a good point. When is your period? And I told them, and they were like, this has been the same thing every month for the last year. This has been the same timing. And it took, again, like Nia said, that compassionate approach where it was like, maybe we need to look into talking to a doctor about if there's something that could be causing this that's cycle related, which was so helpful. And I think I made an appointment, for the week after. And that's when I, first heard about PMDD. So I think parents can definitely pick up on it and definitely know it's coming down the pipe, but there has to be that compassionate approach where, you feel listened to and understood, and not like you're just being crazy and they just want to throw like a diagnosis at you. It's really important to sit down and have that conversation, or even have it over the phone or on FaceTime if you can't sit down together. Yeah.
For me, it was kind of a mixture of both Nia's and Ella's. I had already kind of been diagnosed with PMS, and it was getting worse. And I was at uni at the time, it was second year, so what, 2018, 2019, and I had a massive PMDD episode at like 10 o'clock at night. It was proper scary, and I'd tried to hurt myself like whilst in this episode, and I rang my mum, and mum, we lived about 2.5 hours away, and she drove, like, my gran was in tears. My mum drove down to uni, picked me up, took me home. I remember just being in my pajamas, sat on the sofa. My gran was in like the left hand side of me, and my mum was sat on the floor, and she was like, "We need help. Like, this is not normal." And they booked me a private appointment the next day, in Bradford, where like my family's from. And I think it was that moment I kind of snapped out of denial and back in like into this needs like sorting. Sorry, my gran passed away last year. So she was always worried about me, and that night she tried really hard to hold it together for me. Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry. She tried that night. She tried really hard to hold it together. And I think seeing her reaction, as well as my mum's, just kind of gave me the go ahead to say, like, yeah, I need help. Yeah, I'm gonna stop crying now.
That's okay.
It's okay, Nicole, you're making me
You're
tear up
good.
too. Because I think
Yeah,
so
go
many
ahead.
of
Go
us
ahead.
have had this kind of situation, and I know a lot of people have mentioned episodes and how to be there for your child, especially when things get violent or suicidal. And we haven't really been able to talk too much about it in this webinar, but I think really just having a plan and being prepared to get in the car and drive 2 hours for your child and to sit and talk to them all night if necessary. It's really important to know that we're all crying now. To know
I shouldn't have mentioned
to know that you're there for them and that you're thinking of these things and you have a backup plan. And for me, it came down to my dad saying one time when I was having really bad suicidal ideation, he just said, if you ever need to stop like going to school, or you can't keep doing what you're doing day to day, let me know and we'll figure it out, you know? And we'll do what we need to do to make sure that you're happy and you can come home whenever you need to. So that's huge. So just being there in that respect and having that backup plan and just telling them, you know, I love you and I'm here for you is the biggest thing. I also need to take a breather.
I think
Go on, Nicole.
I think from a young person, it was really, really, really hard to watch my gran see me go through what I was going through and not knowing that she wasn't really able to do anything.
Yeah, that would be tough. I think that's really hard.
It's really hard because I'm like, as a parent, you want to help. You want to help, and when you'll sit there watching your child go through like what they're going through, and you can't do anything, it's really hard. But like, you being the child and just sat there like, while my mum and my gran were just in streams because they just didn't know what it was heartbreaking. And even to like the very end, before like my gran passed away, and I had like an episode like whilst I was at home, like she just, like, she took me in and she didn't even judge. She was like, come here and give me the biggest hug. So yeah, it's hard seeing parents suffer because they can't do anything. Sorry.
It is. It's very hard, and it's very hard being a mom. And, even being here, because me, myself, I care about even you three so much. And I'm sitting here and I feel like, my heart's going to explode, because I'm like, these are some of my girls, and I'm like having a hard time watching this. But as a parent too, it is so hard. It's so hard to watch your child going through something, and you just want to fix everything and have everything be perfect for them. So we really appreciate you all sharing your insights, input, vulnerabilities. This has been completely amazing. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot for any more questions because we are over time. I just wanted to do, I have a quick slide that I really want to do for us to kind of finish things off on, because I really feel it is important. And one of the things that I am very passionate about is people taking care of themselves. And, I just feel that it's really important that people are always safe and they make sure that they are in a good situation. So I'm going to share my screen again for 1 second and finish the slides out. And again, like I said, we will do our best to answer all the questions that did not get answered today. Hopefully we can do that and get everybody the answers that they want. There will also be a recording sent out, but I just wanted to send some gentle reminders out to the parents to support yourself, not only support your children, even though they might be adult children, you're still doing that, but we want you to, acknowledge your own feelings, because this is really hard. It is okay to feel overwhelmed or frustrated, and recognize your feelings and remind yourself that it is normal. It's normal for you to have these feelings. It's normal for your kids to have these feelings, and it is okay. Practice self-kindness for yourself. Speak to yourself in a supportive and encouraging manner. Replace that self-criticism, if you can, with words of kindness and understanding. Mindfulness, if you can stay present in the moment and deal with one thought at a time, if you can. Hopefully not everything is negative in your life. Hopefully there's positive things in your life too, if you can focus on some of those things. This can be really helpful when you're good to yourself, when you're responding to your children. Model self-compassion. If you are good to yourself, or if you're trying to be good to yourself and your child is seeing that, then maybe they'll practice some of those things for themselves as well. Oh, I think I skipped ahead by accident. Sorry. And some gentle tips on how to speak to your child. So some of you may be wondering how you can help your children, teens, adult, child, whatever, develop self-compassion to support their own emotional well-being. Here's a few things that I try to do to encourage in my household. Encourage open conversations. We've heard that a lot here today from Nicole, Ella, and Nia. Having that safe space with your family and being able to discuss your feelings, listening without judgment, and validating their emotions on both sides. The parent has emotions, that your child has emotions, and it's okay. And it's okay for everybody to validate those feelings. Teach mindfulness if you can. Not everybody is a fan of mindfulness, but if, deep breathing, meditation, even staying grounded, being in the present, or going for a walk, doing something that is good for your mental health, because everybody needs that small breakaway. And again, modeling self-compassion. Encourage positive self-talk again, and normalize imperfection. It is okay to be perfect. None of us are perfect at all. I am the first person to say that, everybody has flaws, but it is okay to encourage and see those opportunities for growth. If you have a suggestion, or if you have something that you want to say, and if the space is safe, then it should be okay to have those open conversations. So again, we really appreciate you staying late. If you could, the recording will be available. And again, I am so proud of these people, and I'm proud of the organization. And we really appreciate you all taking the time to watch this. We wish we had more time. I'm sure we could have talked all day, and we have so many things to talk about. We will again do our best to answer. And this will all be sent out to you. And Nicole, Ella, myself, and Nia are all going to take the time to go through all of these comments, and we will draft something and we will be able to send it out to everybody and make that available. So we hope that everybody has a wonderful day. And if you have any questions or if you feel that you need support, you can reach out to support@iapmd.org. If you feel that you are in a crisis situation, please reach out to your nearest crisis or emergency service. And we hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us.